The Sister Secret by Alison Claire Gray. Narrated by Kelsey Navarro. Prologue. A good hit meant careful planning. Every hitman worth a damn knew that much. In Lockwood's previous life, he'd been meticulous about the details. That was what made the difference, in the end. Being sloppy was always the tell of an amateur, and he'd never been that. Lockwood was a professional. He'd never killed anyone for free, and he hadn't killed anyone at all in almost 15 years. That would change tonight. He'd been following his target for 2 days. His mark was a pretty big deal in certain circles. There was no way this would go down and not bring a lot of heat and attention to the incident. It would happen fast, too. Something Lockwood would have to consider in his exit strategy. That's what made this more complicated than anything he'd done in the past. He'd never killed anyone with any sort of fame or notoriety. Most of the people he'd killed would never be missed. They were rotten people who had done terrible things. He'd never killed someone who was tethered to as much power as this asshole was. The guy was the son of one of the most powerful men in one of the most powerful families in Hollywood, the McCoy dynasty, a family considered the Kennedys of the West Coast. Back in Lockwood's assassin days, it had just been paramilitary, clandestine operative stuff, nothing like this. The people who died by his hand had all been killed in the name of protecting something larger than any of them, including himself. It had never been personal at all. He'd never enjoyed the kill like some men did. He'd done it because it's what he was trained to do. It was what he was paid to do. That's why he was so great at what he did. There was no emotion involved. He could separate his own morality from his actions. And then, one day, he couldn't do that anymore. So he'd retired, so to speak. This hit would be different from everything he'd ever done before. But he was ready. The McCoy kid had checked into a crummy little beach motel in Panama City Beach, Florida, called the Siesta. Lockwood watched the guy be a dick to the sweet lady working the front desk, pushing her to hurry up with his keys, bitched about how he didn't have all day. He'd camped out across the street from the place, biding his time as the McCoy guy checked in. It was important to have patience when it came to these things. Things had to be done fast, but never in a state of panic. The motel rooms all had doors facing the street, something that came very much in handy for him tonight. He could see exactly where the McCoy douchebag was heading. Lockwood watched him amble like an oaf toward his room. It was on the 3rd floor, 5th from the left. Lockwood made a note of it. After all, he'd be paying it a visit soon enough. The guy had only been in there 20 seconds, briefly enough that his door hadn't even shut behind him yet, when he was already outside again, stomping his way back down to the front office. He wasn't happy with his room, it looked like. He rushed the poor lady into handing him keys to another room. There were plenty of empty ones, after all. Then he stomped back up the stairs, like a petulant child, this time to the 2nd floor. The room was the very last one on the right. Lockwood counted the doors. It looked like it was 23rd room down, room 223 if he were to guess. He waited to see if the guy left this one. He didn't. It looked like this room would be good enough even for a McCoy. An hour later, the guy left his room again. This time it appeared he was heading out to dinner. Or to one of the many dive bars scattered down the 10 miles of Front Beach Road. McCoy had changed into seersucker shorts and had slicked back what was left of his hair, a pair of Gucci loafers on his feet, the hideous insignia so obvious that anyone could see it, even if they were hunched down in a car almost 2 parking lots away. For someone with so much money, the McCoy jerk sure did look cheap. Lockwood didn't care, as long as the jackass was leaving for a while. As he watched the guy's car fade away into the night, he knew it was time to make his move. The parking lot was empty as far as people went, and the woman at the front desk had gone back into her office. The lot wasn't lit for shit. There were shadows and pools of blackness everywhere now that the sun had set. Another advantage for him as he quickly made his way across it, quietly gliding up the concrete stairs to the second floor and to, sure enough, room 223. He was shocked to see this motel still used standard cylinder tumbler locks on its doors. Wow. He hadn't expected it to be this easy. It almost felt like the universe wanted the McCoy guy to die. Maybe it did. It would make sense with what Lockwood knew about the McCoys. Using a bump key and a swift shove, he was inside room 223 within a few seconds. He softly closed the door behind him, and then made himself comfortable inside the narrow closet at the end of the room, close to the balcony. It would be a while until the guy was back. But when he was, there was no time to be wasted. Lockwood had waited with the closet door open, knowing he'd have enough time to close it once he heard McCoy fiddling with his keys in the lock. He'd stretched out his legs and enjoyed the breeze from the open balcony. McCoy had been kind enough to leave the sliding glass door open before he'd left for the bar. Christ, it had been a long 2 days. And now here they were. They'd come to Panama City Beach with their own missions. He'd followed the guy from Los Angeles all the way to the Florida panhandle. No one knew either of them were there. But soon enough, that would change. McCoy finally came back to his room a little after midnight, clearly bombed out of his mind. Fortunately, he hadn't brought anyone back with him. It had been the only thing Lockwood couldn't plan for. Though, with the knowledge he had about McCoy and his purposes in Panama City Beach, he'd had a hunch there'd be no one coming home with him from the bar. He hadn't gone to the bar to pick up women. He'd gone to the bar to drink his fill in liquid courage. That's the only way men like him found it. Lockwood waited. The McCoy guy was sitting on the bed now. He'd entered the room while blabbering to someone on his cell phone. Lockwood didn't want to do the job in the middle of a phone call. He needed time to leave the scene, as much time as possible. And that wouldn't work if someone in McCoy's life thought or knew he was in trouble. Or worse, if McCoy told the person on the other end anything about him before he finished the job. So, he'd wait some more. In the meantime, he listened. "This place is a shit show," McCoy hooted into his iPhone. "A lot of gorgeous women, but yikes. Daddy issues galore. But damn, what is it about trailer parks that makes their women so hot? That's a mystery that needs to be solved. Explains a lot, though." Lockwood could see McCoy through the vents in the closet door. He was a pathetic, doughy man in his mid-40s. The coke bloat made him look closer to 50, though. "I can't wait to see the look on her face when she walks in the door and sees me." He laughed into his cell. Lockwood wondered who he was talking to. Not that it mattered. The scum in the McCoy family and businesses went all the way down. It was an endless line of dirtbags. "You know, my dad always said, if it flies, floats, or fucks, rent it," McCoy rambled. Boy, was he right. This chick has been floating and screwing all over the world for money. She's nothing but a damn yacht girl, just like he said she'd be. In the end, that's all women like her are good for. Can't wait to tell her that before I kill her. She needs to hear the truth. No one ever saw her as anything more than what she is. Lockwood couldn't wait for this. Now he understood what it felt like to want to kill someone. He would enjoy this, for the first time in his life. If only the guy would get off the damn phone. "I think I'm gonna fuck with her," McCoy laughed. The sound of it was more like a wheezing. Years of vices and bad choices were in it. Lockwood could hear all of them in the guy's voice and his grating chuckle. Lockwood saw him pick up the room phone. He dialed the